The man was lost. This was more than a simple misdirection on a familiar path. This was a profound, sinking realization that the world he knew had been swallowed whole by the forest. The air itself was different here, thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers, and the light that filtered through the dense canopy was tinged with an unsettling emerald glow. This was the Whispering Wood, a place marked on every map with warnings and skulls. Tales were told of those who entered and never returned, of voices on the wind that led travelers astray, and of the monster that guarded its heart. His name was Kaelen, and he had run out of choices. A strange blight had fallen upon his village's crops, a gray rot that stole the life from the soil and the hope from his people's eyes. The elders spoke of a single, luminous bloom that grew only in the wood's deepest clearing, a flower said to purify any poison. He was a man of practicality, a carpenter by trade, not a hero. But he was also the only one young and foolish enough, or perhaps desperate enough, to volunteer. For 2 days he had pushed deeper, his boots sinking into the soft, mossy ground. The whispers had started almost immediately, not in his ears, but in his mind, a faint, melodic buzzing that was almost words. He ignored them, focusing on the map he'd copied from a crumbling scroll. Now, on the 3rd day, the map was sodden and useless in his grip, and the whispers were louder. A branch snapped behind him. Kaelen froze, his hand going to the knife at his belt. He turned slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. The forest was a wall of green and shadow, still and silent. The whispering had stopped. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice swallowed by the dense foliage. "I'm just seeking the heart bloom." A ripple moved through the ferns to his left. It was not the movement of an animal. It was smoother, more deliberate. Then she emerged. She was taller than any woman he had ever seen, her form both terrifying and strangely elegant. Skin like polished walnut was visible in patches, but much of her was covered in a living armor of dark, razor-sharp thorns that coiled around her limbs and torso. Her hair was not hair at all, but a cascade of creeping ivy and wilted-looking blossoms. Her eyes were the color of ancient amber, and they held no warmth, only a deep, weary coldness. This was the monster of the tales, the briar witch. "You are trespassing." Her voice was like the sound of rustling leaves and cracking twigs, layered and ancient. Kaelen could not speak. Fear held his tongue, a primal, icy fear that rooted him to the spot. She took a step forward, and the thorns on her shoulders seemed to lengthen and sharpen. "They always come," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Seeking cures, seeking power. They see the wood and see a thing to be used. They see me and see an obstacle to be destroyed." She raised a hand, and the vines hanging from the trees around them began to stir, slithering like snakes. "Your fear is the same as all the others. It is so very tired." It was the resignation in her voice, the sheer, weary boredom, that finally broke through Kaelen's terror. He was going to die, yes, but he would not die as just another predictable fool. I'm not afraid of you," he lied, his voice trembling. The amber eyes narrowed. "Liar!" A vine shot out, wrapping around his wrist with shocking speed. It was cold and strong as iron, pulling the knife from his grasp. Another vine snaked around his ankle, and he was jerked off his feet, landing hard on the damp ground. He struggled for a moment, but the more he moved, the tighter the vines constricted. He forced himself to go limp, panting, staring up at the creature who loomed over him. She looked down at him, her head tilted. She was waiting for the screams, the pleas, the curses. It was part of the ritual. But Kaelen just lay there, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a wave of crushing despair. He had failed. His village would wither. His family would starve. A single, hot tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. He did not look at the thorns or the slithering vines. He looked past them, at the sorrow in her ancient eyes. "Please," he whispered, the word barely audible. She leaned closer, the thorns on her face just inches from his. "Please, you beg for your life." "It is too late for that. Not for me," Kaelen said, his voice gaining a shred of strength from his despair. "I came for a heart bloom. My village. There's a sickness in the land. The children are getting weak. I was told it was the only cure." He closed his eyes, too exhausted for more words. "It doesn't matter now." A long silence stretched between them. The vine around his wrist loosened almost imperceptibly. He opened his eyes to find her staring at him with an expression he could not decipher. It wasn't pity, it was curiosity. "You are a fool," she stated flatly. "The heart bloom is not a trinket for humans to pluck. It is the soul of this place. To take it is to wound the wood." "I didn't know," he said. I had to try." He expected her to finish him then. Instead, she straightened up. The vines retreated, slinking back into the shadows, though he knew they were still there, waiting. He was released. He sat up, rubbing his sore wrist, staring at her in utter confusion. Why? Was all he could manage. She turned her back to him, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "Your fear was predictable. Your despair was predictable. But your reason was not entirely selfish. It changes nothing. You will still die here. The wood will claim you, as it claims all things, but you may do it with a little more dignity than the others." She began to walk away, her thorny form blending seamlessly with the trees. "Do not try to run. The wood does not like to be chased." And with that, she was gone, leaving Kaelen alone on the forest floor, more bewildered than ever. The monster had not killed him. She had looked at him, had seen past his fear, and had found a sliver of something that stayed her hand. He was a prisoner, but he was alive, and as he sat in the deepening green gloom, he realized the whispers in his mind had changed. They were no longer just noise. They were now a quiet, mournful song, and for the first time, he thought he could almost understand the words. Kaelen did not try to run. The memory of the iron-strong vines was too fresh, and the witch's warning felt less like a threat and more like a statement of fact, like being told not to breathe water. Instead, he found a small, relatively dry hollow at the base of a great oak and sat, watching the forest. The emerald light deepened into twilight, and the wood began to glow. Fungi on the tree trunks pulsed with a soft, blue light, and motes of phosphorescence drifted in the air like sleepy fireflies. The mournful song in his mind softened into a gentle hum. He must have dozed off, because he was awakened by a presence. She was there, standing a few paces away, holding a rough wooden bowl filled with water and a few dark berries. "Drink," she said, placing the bowl on the ground between them. "The water is clean. The berries will not harm you." "What are they?" Kaelen asked, his throat parched. "Sorrow berries," she replied. "They taste of memory. It is all the wood offers to those who do not belong." Hesitantly, Kaelen took the bowl. The water was cool and sweet. The berries, when he bit into one, were surprisingly rich, but with a sharp, melancholic aftertaste that made him think of lost summers and forgotten names. He ate them all. "You have a name?" he asked, looking up at her. She remained standing, a silhouette of thorns against the glowing wood. She was silent for so long he thought she would not answer. "I had one once. It was taken. Now I am what you see, the guardian. The thorn. My name is Kaelen." "I know," she said. "The wood knows the names of all who walk it." This strange, quiet coexistence became their routine. During the day, she would vanish into the deeper shadows, and Kaelen would explore the immediate area, always feeling a subtle, vegetative pressure dissuading him from going too far. He saw incredible things: a stream that flowed with liquid silver, trees that rearranged their branches when they thought he wasn't looking, and once, a stag with antlers made of intertwined crystalline wood. He was a prisoner in a cage of wonders. In the evenings, she would return, sometimes with food, sometimes just to stand watch. He began to talk, not out of bravery, but out of a need to shatter the silence. He told the thorny, silent woman about his village, about the scent of fresh-cut pine in his workshop, about his little sister's laugh. He spoke of the world outside as if describing a dream. One afternoon, he found a young fox with its leg trapped in a fissure of rock. Its panic was a sharp, bright thing in the tranquil air. Without thinking, Kaelen knelt, using a sturdy stick as a lever to carefully pry the rocks apart, whispering soothing words as he would to a frightened dog. When the fox was free, it limped away, casting a single, knowing look back at him before disappearing into the ferns. He turned to find her watching him from a distance, her amber eyes unreadable. "It was in pain," he said. Simply, she said nothing, but that evening, she sat, not next to him, but closer than before, on a fallen log draped in velvet moss. It was the first time she had chosen to share his space. "Why do you guard this place?" Kaelen ventured, emboldened by her proximity. "It is what I was made for," she answered, her voice low. "A long time ago, a sorcerer, wounded and fleeing his enemies, poured his bitterness and his power into this wood. He twisted it, bound it to his will, and created a warden to keep its magic from the world. He shaped that warden from the wood's own heartwood and his own despair. That was I." "You didn't choose this." Her laugh was a dry, brittle sound. "Choice is a luxury for things that are truly alive. I am a spell with a shape, a warning. My purpose is to ensure the loneliness he felt becomes the law of this place." Kaelen looked at her, truly looked. He saw the thorns, yes, but he also saw the elegant curve of her neck where the bark-like skin was smooth. He saw the way the tiny, wilted flowers in her hair would sometimes tremble, as if hoping to bloom. He saw the profound isolation in her eyes, an isolation that mirrored the one he had felt in his village as the blight spread. "It sounds like a sad story," he said softly. "It is not a story," she corrected him, her tone final. "It is a fact, like the rain." And with that, she stood and melted back into the trees, leaving him alone with the pulsing glow of the fungi and the whispers that now felt less like a song and more like a conversation. He was only beginning to understand that the change began with a cough, a deep, rattling sound that tore through the peaceful hum of the wood. Kaelen woke one morning feeling as though his bones were filled with lead. A gray pallor had settled on his skin, and a cold sweat clung to him despite the forest's cool air. The blight from his world had followed him here, a stowaway in his blood. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. The world swam in and out of focus, the emerald light now a nauseating swirl. The whispers in his mind became frantic, sharp with alarm. She was there in an instant, her thorny form kneeling beside him. Her amber eyes, usually so cold, were wide with something that looked like panic. "The rot," she whispered, her leafy voice hushed. "It is inside you. The wood feels it, it is." Offended, "I'm sorry," Kaelen gasped, the apology feeling absurd. He was apologizing for dying. "This is not how it ends," she said, more to herself than to him. "Not like this, not from the outside." She placed a hand on his forehead. Her touch was not cold and hard like the vines, but surprisingly warm. The thorns on her fingers retracted, curling back into her skin to reveal slender, wood-grained hands. The wood's magic is one of preservation, of isolation. It cannot fight this foreign sickness. It can only reject you. It will expel your life to protect itself. Then let it," he murmured, closing his eyes. The fight was gone. No, the word was firm, absolute. He felt her hands on his chest, a warm, pulsing energy flowing from her into him. It was the feeling of deep roots drinking, of sunlight on leaves, of slow, patient growth over centuries. It was the essence of the wood dot as the energy flowed. Images flooded his mind, not his memories, but hers, a glade, sun-dappled and warm. A woman with skin of smooth alder and hair like a cascade of green willow, laughing. She had a name then. It was Syl. She was dancing, and the flowers bloomed where her feet touched the ground. She was free. Then, darkness. A man, his face twisted with pain and power, his robes stained with old blood. He spoke words that cut like knives, weaving a cage of sorrow and thorn around her. "You will be my legacy," he hissed, "a monument to solitude. You will guard this place until a selfless heart acknowledges you not as a warden, but as its soul, a heart that will never come." The thorns grew, the beauty was buried, and Syl was gone. Replaced by the guardian dot, the vision faded, and Kaelen's eyes fluttered open. The warmth was still pouring into him, pushing back the gray cold. He saw her face, strained with effort, the thorns on her cheeks seeming softer, less defined. She was giving him a piece of her own life force, the very magic that sustained her. He was too weak to speak, but his hand found hers. He laced his wood-grained fingers with his own, squeezing with what little strength he had. The gratitude he felt was a physical ache in his chest, more powerful than the sickness. He looked into her amber eyes, now filled with a vulnerability he had never seen, and he spoke the words that came from the very core of that gratitude. They were not grand or poetic. They were simple, human, and utterly sincere. "Thank you," he whispered. The effect was instantaneous. The world did not shake. The sky did not crack, but the air itself seemed to still, as if the forest had taken a single, held breath. A small, sharp sound, like a snapping twig, came from her. One of the thorns on her shoulder shattered into 1,000 pieces of glittering dust. Then another, on her wrist. A soft, green light began to emanate from beneath the bark of her skin. The wilted flowers in her hair trembled, and one, a small bell-shaped blossom, straightened, its color shifting from dull brown to a vibrant, luminous blue. She stared at him. Her lips parted in shock. The weary coldness in her eyes had melted, replaced by a dawning, terrifying hope. What did you do?" She breathed. I just said thank you," Kaelen said, his own strength returning as the gray pallor receded from his skin. She looked down at her hands, at the disappearing thorns, at the light spilling from within. "No one," she whispered, her voice trembling, losing its rustle and gaining a softer, more melodic tone. "No one has ever thanked the monster before." In that moment, he did not see a monster. He saw Syl, remembering what it was to be seen. And Kaelen, his heart beating strongly again, understood that the curse was not broken by force, but by a kindness it was never designed to withstand. The change was not a gentle unfurling, but a quiet, relentless revolution. Over the next day, the thorns that had been her armor continued to fall away, crumbling to dust or softening into velvety moss. The bark-like texture of her skin smoothed, revealing the elegant, strong lines of the woman, Syl, who had been trapped within. Her hair, once a tangle of ivy, now flowed as living willow, adorned with those new, luminous blue flowers that chimed softly when she moved. She was still clearly still of the wood, but the sharp, defensive edges were gone, and the wood itself was changing with her. The emerald gloom lightened, allowing actual shafts of golden sunlight to pierce the canopy for the first time in centuries. The silver stream seemed to run clearer, its song brighter. The mournful whispers transformed into a chorus of rustling leaves that sounded almost like laughter. The entire forest was waking up from a long, nightmare-filled sleep, but the awakening stirred other things as well. A deep, resonant grumble began to emanate from the heart of the wood, a sound of grinding stone and ancient malice. The new flowers closed their petals. The gentle light dimmed. "He is stirring," Syl said, her voice tight with a fear Kaelen had never heard in her before. She was standing at the edge of their small clearing, looking toward the source of the sound. "The sorcerer?" Kaelen asked, coming to stand beside her. He felt stronger now, the blight completely gone from his body, purified by her magic and the shifting energy of the wood. "Not him. He is long dead. It is his legacy, his bitterness given a voice, the shadow he left behind to enforce his will. It knows the curse is failing. It will not allow it." As if on cue, the ground trembled. The trees at the edge of the clearing twisted, their bark blackening as if scorched. From the darkness between them, a form began to coalesce, a shifting, humanoid shape of tangled roots, blackened thorns, and swirling shadows. It had no face, only two points of malevolent red light where its eyes should be. It was the embodiment of the original curse, the prison keeper, guardian. It hissed, its voice the sound of tearing roots. "You break your covenant. You defy your purpose. Return to your form." "My purpose was a lie," Syl replied, her voice gaining strength. She stood straight, the blue flowers in her hair glowing defiantly. "I am not your weapon of sorrow anymore. You are what you were made to be." The shadow roared, surging forward. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, not at Syl, but at Kaelen. "The human, the infection. He is the key. Remove the key, and the lock will hold." A whip of shadow snapped toward Kaelen's throat, but before it could connect, a wall of intertwined roots erupted from the ground, blocking it. Syl stood with her hands raised, her will commanding the wood to protect him. "The wood chooses," she declared, and for the first time, there was not just hope in her voice, but power. It no longer chooses isolation. It chooses life. A battle began, not of sword and shield, but of will and essence. The shadow sorcerer lashed out with blights and decay, seeking to wither the newly awakened life. Syl countered with growth and light. summoning vines to bind it and blooms whose light seared the darkness. Kaelen was powerless to fight this magical war, but he was not idle. He saw the pattern. The shadow drew its power from the places where the old sorrow was deepest, a blighted patch of earth, a tree split by lightning, a pool of stagnant water. While still held the creature's main attention, Kaelen moved. He used his hands, his carpenter's understanding of grain and structure, to clear the deadfall from the blighted earth, allowing new shoots to push through. He diverted a freshet from the silver stream into the stagnant pool. With each small act of healing, the shadow flinched. With each place of sorrow that Kaelen mended, Sil grew stronger. He was not breaking the curse with magic, but by giving the wood a reason to fight for itself, showing it a future beyond its lonely vigil. The shadow, realizing its source of power was being systematically undone, gave a final, furious shriek and gathered all its remaining energy for a blast aimed directly at Sil's heart. But as it lunged, Kaelen stepped in its path, not with a weapon, but with his own body. His arms spread wide in a final, desperate act of protection. The shadow halted, confused by this illogical, selfless act. That hesitation was its undoing. Syl single quotes S power, amplified by the healing wood and the love she felt for the human who had stood for her, erupted in a wave of pure, green light. It washed over the shadow, not destroying it, but untangling it. The bitterness unwove, the sorrow dissipated, and the ancient malice was silenced. Returning to the peaceful earth from which it came, the forest fell silent. The red lights were gone. The shadow was no more. Syl rushed to Kaelen's side, her hands on his face. "You foolish, wonderful man," she breathed, her amber eyes shining with tears. He smiled, weary but triumphant. "You were magnificent." Round them, the whispering wood was silent no longer. It was filled with the sounds of birdsong, buzzing insects, and the joyful rustle of leaves in a warm breeze. The world had not ended. It had begun. They stood at the edge of the wood, where the tangled roots met the sun-bleached grass of the outside world. The change was stark. Behind them was a forest vibrant with newfound color and sound. Before them, the fields of Kaelen's village were still gray and sickly, the blight clinging to the land like a shroud. Syl, now fully transformed, looked out with a deep sadness. His bitterness poisoned more than just the wood. It seeped out, a slow sickness. My isolation allowed it to spread. "Then our job isn't finished," Kaelen said, taking her hand. Her fingers, now smooth and warm, laced with his. The touch was no longer forbidden, but a source of strength. They walked into the village together. The people, haggard and hopeless, emerged from their huts, their eyes wide with disbelief. They saw Kaelen, whom they had given up for dead, and they saw the woman with skin of polished wood and hair of living willow, glowing with a soft, internal light. They saw the vibrant blue flowers that chimed in her hair and smelled the scent of rain-washed earth, and blooming things that followed her. Fear was their first reaction. They saw a forest spirit, a Phi creature, and they shrank back. Kaelen stepped forward. "This is Sil," he said, his voice clear and strong, carrying over the frightened whispers. "She is the heart of the whispering wood, and she is here to help." An elder, his face lined with worry, stepped forward. "Help, the wood is a place of death. It has taken many of our own. It was a prison," Sil replied, her voice melodic and calming. "As your land is now. The same sorrow that bound me has sickened your soil. But the prison is open now." She walked to the center of the village, to the withered remains of the great harvest oak that stood there. She placed her hands upon its dead bark and closed her eyes. Kaelen stood beside her, a silent pillar of support. She did not fight the blight. She did not command it to leave. Instead, she began to hum, a low, resonant sound that was the very song of the healed wood. She offered the memory of clean water, the feeling of strong roots in rich soil, the joy of unfurling leaves reaching for the sun. She poured the essence of life into the dead tree. For a long moment, nothing happened. The villagers watched, skeptical and afraid. Then, a single, tiny green shoot pushed its way out from the base of the dead oak. Then another. A ripple of green spread through the gray field, as if a wave of color was washing away the dust. The wheat straightened, its heads plumping with golden grain. The vegetables in the gardens swelled and brightened. The very air lost its stale, sickly smell and was replaced by the fertile scent of healthy earth. A collective gasp went through the crowd. It was a miracle, quiet and profound. The change that began in the forest was now complete in the village. The two worlds, separated for so long by fear and a curse, were now intertwined. The people did not see a monster anymore. They saw a savior. They saw the spirit of the land return to them. In the days that followed, Kaelen and Sil worked together. He, with his knowledge of the people and his practical hands. She, with her deep, innate connection to the growing things. They taught the villagers how to live in harmony with the renewed wood, to take only what they needed and to give back in kind. The heart bloom was no longer a legend to be stolen, but a symbol of a bond that had been reforged. One evening, they stood again at the edge of the wood, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The village behind them was filled with the sounds of celebration and the smell of baking bread. From the first new harvest, you gave me my name back, Sil said softly, leaning her head against Kaelen's shoulder. You gave me my world back. You gave me my world back, too, he replied, holding her close. And you gave me a new one. She was no longer the thorn guardian of a cursed wood, and he was no longer just a carpenter from a dying village. They were the bridge. They were the proof that a single thank you, born from gratitude and seeing the soul within the monster, could not just stop a heart, but could start a world beating anew. And in the gentle whisper of the leaves and the warm light of the village windows, they built their life together.